James Anderson was an 80-year-old black veteran, and today he sat quietly at a small corner table in a busy diner. Dressed modestly in a worn but clean jacket, his hands rested on a cup of coffee he'd ordered to pass the time. The diner's atmosphere was lively, with the usual crowd of locals chatting over meals and enjoying the afternoon. James's eyes occasionally drifted to the door as he patiently waited for his son, who was running late. Little did he know that trouble and humiliation were going to walk through the door first. The door swung open, and two police officers stepped inside, Officer Mills and Officer Harper. Their badges shone as they scanned the room for an open table. But their eyes quickly landed on James, who was sitting alone in the corner. Mills leaned closer to Harper and whispered something with a smirk, and they both laughed. To them, James seemed out of place. The diner was in a mostly white neighborhood, and it wasn't often they saw someone like him here, especially someone his age. So, they decided to investigate, and approached his table without hesitation. Officer Mills took the lead and sharply asked James what he was doing there. There was no greeting or politeness, just a blunt, unjustified demand for an explanation. James looked up from his coffee and calmly replied that he was waiting for someone, his voice steady, showing no discomfort despite their scrutiny. Harper chimed in with a mocking tone, telling James that it was unusual to see an old black man trying to fit in with the big boys, and laughed as if he had made a joke. James didn't react to the taunt, maintaining his composure, as he again explained that he was simply waiting for his son. But his calmness seemed to irritate the officers even more. Mills, unsatisfied with James's answer, leaned in closer and demanded to see his ID. James complied, pulling out his veteran's ID card and handing it over. He had carried it for years as a symbol of his service and the sacrifices he had made. But when Mills looked at the card, he dismissed it with a sneer and muttered that it was probably fake, then handed it back with a flick of his wrist. Harper agreed, making a snide comment about how it was hard to believe someone like James could have a veteran ID, implying that, back in the day, people like him only washed dishes or did manual labor. The officers continued to harass James, and the other diners began to notice. Some glanced over with curiosity, while others shifted uncomfortably. The lively chatter in the diner quieted down, and the atmosphere grew tense, yet no one intervened. Despite the humiliation he was enduring, James remained calm. He had faced far worse in his life and wasn't about to let these young men break his spirit. Mills warned James that if he didn't leave, they would remove him forcibly. He didn't seem interested in James's explanation and dismissed him as nothing more than a troublemaker. The officers made it clear they didn't want someone like him in this diner. The situation was nearing a boiling point, with the officers looming over him, expecting him to either leave quietly or give them an excuse to act. James held his ground, sitting with hands calmly on the table, looking at the officers with a steady gaze. He knew they were humiliating him solely because of his skin color, but he also knew that responding with anger would only give them the excuse they wanted. The officers grew more impatient, and used to anyone questioning their authority. And James's quiet dignity was clearly getting under their skin. Finally, Mills reached out and shoved James's chair, knocking it over with a loud crash, startling everyone in the diner. James was forced to stand, yet he remained calm. Without warning, Mills began to pat James down roughly, muttering that they needed to make sure he wasn't hiding anything. James raised his hands slightly, complying without surrendering. He had been through similar situations before, where a calm attitude was the only thing keeping things from getting lethal. But the anger bubbling inside him was hard to ignore. After all he had sacrificed, being treated like a criminal in his own country was almost too much to bear. Meanwhile, Harper picked up James's veteran hat from the table, an old but cherished symbol of pride. Looking at it with disdain, Harper tossed it to the ground. "You don't deserve to wear this," he sneered. Anger flashed across James's face, but he remained silent, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing him break. The officers then went further, twisting his wrist behind his back, causing him to wince. They laughed, joking that he wasn't as tough as he thought. As James gritted his teeth against the pain, he finally spoke up. "You're taking this too far," he said quietly. "I've seen things you wouldn't believe. I deserve better than this." But Mills sneered. "You think you can tell us what to do? You're spending the night in a cell for rough handling of 2 innocent officers." Without hesitation, he slapped handcuffs on James's wrists. Harper then picked up James's walking cane, an old, sturdy piece James had leaned on for years, and broke it in 2, throwing the pieces aside. As the officers began dragging James toward the door, he managed to gesture toward a card on the table with a nod. Annoyed but curious, Mills picked it up, expecting something trivial. Instead, the blood drained from his face. The card was a reservation with "Chief Anderson" written on it in bold letters. Mills realized the gravity of his actions. James was the father of their boss, the police chief. The arrogance drained from Mills's face as he understood the enormity of their actions. Just then, the door swung open, and in walked Chief Robert Anderson. A tall man with a commanding presence, he immediately assessed the situation. Chief Anderson approached his father, his heart sinking at the sight of his worn clothes, the broken cane, and the handcuffs on his wrists. James looked up at his son with pride, his calm demeanor unshaken. Chief Anderson turned to Mills and Harper, his voice low and steady as he asked them what they thought they were doing. The officers stammered, apologizing and trying to explain they hadn't known who James was, but the chief cut them off. "It doesn't matter who he is," he said firmly. "Every person deserves respect." He reminded them that his father was a citizen and a veteran who had served the country honorably. Their behavior was disgraceful. The chief ordered the officers to report to his office first thing in the morning. Mills and Harper hung their heads, shame evident on their faces as they left the diner in silence. As the chief gently unlocked the cuffs from his father's wrists, James freed his hands, grateful to be rid of the restraints. Chief Anderson apologized, both for being late and for how his father had been treated. James looked at his son with pride, saying he was proud of how he had handled the situation. The story didn't end there. News of the incident spread through the community, which responded with outrage. Under Chief Anderson's leadership, the department launched an investigation, suspending Mills and Harper for 6 months without pay and requiring them to attend mandatory retraining on issues of prejudice and respect. The diner incident became a powerful reminder that prejudice had no place in the town. For James, it was a painful reminder of the battles he had fought at home as well as on the battlefield. Yet, he felt a sense of hope and pride, knowing that his son's actions would help to foster change in the community.